But first, one day on from Peter Dutton's common sense call to halt arrivals coming out of Gaza until this Labor government can actually guarantee that adequate security checks are actually being done. Well, already then, the accusations of racism have started up. Now, that's despite the reality that out in the suburbs, as the latest Resolve poll shows us, 46% of Australians say they feel less safe here since the war broke out. Now, what does Labor think will happen to that when more Palestinians are admitted? We already know that there's concern about events in the Middle East that have contributed to the increase in Australia's terror threat level. What more evidence does the government need that without checks, we simply can't admit anyone from an active war zone? For more on this, let's bring in the Leader of the Nationals in the Senate, Bridget McKenzie. Well, Bridget, thank you for your time. Let's start with these accusations against Peter Dutton that this is all motivated by by racism. My colleague Andrew Clennell followed up on this claim with Zali Steggall this afternoon, and she wasn't backing down. Have a listen.
OK, yes or no, do you think Peter Dutton's a racist?
I think he's condoning racist policies.
So do you think he's a racist? By
association, yes.
OK, and Mike Burgess has warned about inflammatory language by politicians. Surely your statement's in the same category. Calling the opposition leader a racist, I mean, that's stirring up a lot, isn't it?
Well, except we're in an extraordinary situation where a person behaving in a racist way should be allowed to do so, but a person calling out that poor behaviour should be reprimanded.
This is a serious claim for her to make against another parliamentarian.
Absolutely, Peter, and it's an appalling claim. Peter Dutton is not a racist, and for Zali Steggall to continue to double down on this language, I think plays exactly into the issues the Director-General of ASIO, Mr Burgess, was outlining for all of us in leadership roles as members of Parliament, to actually not be stirring up hatred and violence and aggression. And by calling the Leader of the Opposition a racist, that is exactly what she's doing, and was followed by Senator Hanson-Young from the Greens, claiming the Leader of the Nationals was somehow silent on the slaughter of babies. And it's this sort of violent, aggressive rhetoric which actually makes the political discourse really, really hard to go forward. At the end of the day, what Peter Dutton is calling for, what we in the coalition are calling for, is a sensible pause to bringing in refugees from Gaza, from a war zone, without appropriate checks. Now, we didn't do that in government, and we've had a whole week where the Prime Minister's been verballing the DG from ASIO, saying basically that they are guaranteeing they're getting all the checks right. Well, it wasn't what Murray Watt said when he was asked a very similar question in the Senate. So the PM has misled the Parliament. He's misleading the broader community by continuing to say that he's running the same process as we did, because it's not true. He's breaching his own ministerial code of conduct that he set down in June 22, which talks about ministers having to be honest and upfront, and if they commit an error, to fix it and update the Australian public and the Parliament as soon as practical. And he's refused to do that.
Yeah, I remember very vividly what happened the last time we took in a big cohort from Syria. I was there working for Tony Abbott. There was 12,000 or so that came in. The government now, Labor, is trying to say that what we are doing now with people out of Gaza is exactly the same as what Tony Abbott did. But he was on the program last night and I asked him that specific question. Here's what Tony Abbott said.
People who came at that time were actually Christians from the Middle East. And second, we had our officials on the ground who went through and carefully vetted all of those arrivals. It is simply impossible to do security checks on people in Gaza.
Bridget, I want people at home to understand this. People were repatriated to a third country. They were checked there on the ground by Australian officials. We checked the identity, the name that they gave us. We checked the paperwork. We did biometrics, so blood, DNA, fingerprinting, all that sort of testing. We then looked on databases with the information of their real name, not just the name they told us. And then and only then did they get a visa to Australia. Now, what's happening here is Mohammed fronts up with a piece of paper from the Palestinian authorities saying that that is his real name. Well, we can't check that. There's no biometric testing. We're not in a third country with Australian officials. He comes here on a short-term visitor's visa. We might run the name Mohammed through the system. There's no red flag. But we don't know if that's his real name. And of course, while he's here, Tony Burke's under pressure from locals in his electorate to give Mohammed a permanent visa to stay in Australia forever. I think Australians need to understand what's being done before and what's not being done today.
Yeah, Peter, you're dead right. I mean, being able to live in Australia is like you've won the golden ticket to Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. People want to live here. With social cohesion, we're safe, a very, equal opportunity here for if you can actually get to Australia. So it is very competitive, and we have people prepared to lie, prepared to get on boats, prepared to do all the things you spoke about in order to get through. We don't have an embassy in Gaza. With the Syrian refugees, we took them to a third country, biometric testing, etc. Similarly with the Afghan refugees, because we had to make sure that we weren't actually importing conflict from another area and denigrating our social cohesion here at home. We needed to make sure that the people we were bringing in were going to actually contribute to our country, not break our country apart. And I think we're very confident in what we did as a government, and for the Prime Minister to somehow suggest all week that they're running these people out of Gaza, the 3,000 that have already been granted visas, through some sort of process is laughable, because they're not. Other ministers are refusing to guarantee that these individuals have gone through essentially a character test. Do you sympathise with Hamas? If you do, we don't want you here. And that should be kind of like a basic requirement. And it's very easy, if you aren't going through those checks and balances, to actually import conflicts from far away onto the suburban streets of our capital cities and further deteriorate our communities.
Bridget, I think you know where the ordinary Australian sits on this issue, and I think they'd be saying to
absolutely.
You, keep going.
Thank you, Peter.
Time.
We will.
Have a good weekend.